Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. In a couple of seconds, you will hear legal analysis pertaining to why the judge is almost certainly going to recuse himself or has already decided to recuse himself from the case, which will essentially overturn and reverse the guilty verdict. This is an article, ladies and gentlemen, from PBS News. This is the third time that Trump's team has asked for a recusal. Hit subscribe in a couple of seconds. You will hear not only analysis on this, which is absolutely huge. I told you, ladies and gentlemen, a unanimous Supreme Court decision would overturn the Colorado ban. That took place. I told you that Trump would get a monumental, historic victory in terms of immunity, presidential immunity, which does not allow Trump or any president to take the life of a rival. Anyone who says that, anyone who even alludes to that, is a complete and utter imbecile. It's for official acts like a speech, like speaking to DOJ or officials or governors throughout the country. These are official acts a president cannot be criminalized for. They used a very broad, ambiguous, vague legal statute, the 18 U.S. Code 371 statute. Then they said, oh my God, our attempt to imprison Trump hasn't worked, so therefore he can end the life of people. This is not true. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is a PBS article. Meanwhile, Trump's lawyer asked the judge last week for a third time to exit the case, saying his daughter's work for Vice President Kamala Harris's presidential campaign underscores questions about his ability to be impartial. Harris is now the Democratic nominee for president. Could you imagine a judge who worked for Trump's 2016 campaign? Could you imagine the endless coverage? But this is PBS. I think the reasoning behind the judge entertaining a third time to recuse himself is the following. He could have simply said, nah, I'm not recusing. When the market goes down and completely tanks further in the next month or so, he's pushed it to September 18th as opposed to September 6th or 8th. The reasoning is the more the financial downturn takes place, the greater the likelihood and chance that Trump defeats Harris. Trump will win. There's no doubt. He's like 90+% in my mind, especially because the financial downturn, the Nikkei is down again today. It's going to go way down, up, way down, up. That's what takes place before that's what took place before 1929, 2000, 2008. It's not just going to go down immediately, you'll have that one day. Okay, so it'll go up, down before that one day where it completely tanks. Yes, the other day was similar to that. But hit subscribe. Bloomberg, Trump hush money judge says he'll decide on recusal next week. I'm not predicting he categorically will recuse, but the chances are a lot higher that he recuses now, and the entire case falls apart, and the conviction and jail sentence is reversed or blocked and prevented from taking place. Here is why. Hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get started. The financial downturn is just getting started, ladies and gentlemen, which cements Trump's victory, and I think that's a huge component of the political calculus here.
Carlson, what's this about a judge related to one of the Trump cases making negative statements about Trump? Is it okay for a judge to do that? Can you explain the circumstances here?
No, it's not, because I think it shows bias and prejudice. But frankly, that's all we're getting from these judges. Not just Beryl Howe, the one you're talking about here, said all kinds of disparaging things about President Trump and now has a number of cases in front of her. But also Judge Engoron, Judge Merchan. I mean, all these judges, like Judge Merchan. You talk about someone who should recuse himself from this situation where his daughter is a big-time fundraiser for Democrat elected officials. So this is just more of the left. What we see with this whole lawfare operation, what we see with all these cases against President Trump. Now, the good news is, Stuart, they're all falling apart. I mean, the Fani Willis case is falling apart in Georgia. We found out Jack Smith changed the sequence of the documents that he seized at Mar-a-Lago. The scanned documents don't match up with the physical documents. Some people would say that's tampering with evidence. And of course, the irony is you got...
In both of those cases, including the immunity case, have completely dissolved and become obsolete. So the immunity case took care of the special counsel January indictments. The Georgia case has completely dismantled, and the classified data case has actually been thrown out. This case, once the judge recuses, I think the judge will seriously consider, because I think the calculus is, of course, there's conflicts of interest, but you have a financial collapse on the horizon that cements Trump's victory. By the way, Harris's VP pick is abysmal. I don't know what they're probably thinking the same thing they thought 4 years ago. It really doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. Anyway, let's continue.
Jack Smith mishandling the documents while he's charging President Trump with mishandling documents. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. That case is falling apart. And then, of course, we know how ridiculous the case in New York with Alvin Bragg is.
Yes, indeed we do. Maybe this is why Trump is gaining momentum politically and gaining voters.
So, yeah, the Nikkei's down today. The Nikkei in Japan is a pretty good barometer of what's taking place. 512, it was just back up to 300 plus down. Now it's 500 points down. None of this is good for Democrats. The financial collapse with like small banks collapsing, hedge funds, crypto tanking, retirement accounts losing 40-50% of their value. That is almost certainly going to take place. That will take place almost certainly in the next 3 months. That cements Trump's victory. Okay. Now, then you have possible, I'm not sure if there's criminal liability if the judge should recuse and doesn't, but then you have the Supreme Court getting involved with overturning the guilty verdict because the FEC dropped the case, the DOJ dropped the case, and there was no case to begin with. A state cannot, this is the unconstitutional part of all of this, a state cannot level a federal statute at anyone without the DOJ, or in this case, the FEC involved, and the FEC dropped the case. Furthermore, 3 FEC chairmen, we should also, I believe, trust these amazing experts, apparently Democrats don't for some reason, stated that Trump did not commit a crime. He could have paid Stormy with dollar bills, and it still wouldn't have been a crime. But I don't understand why the judge would take the legal or possible, it might not be criminal risk, but possible risk of it being overturned by the Supreme Court, and then Trump as president looking into how all of this took place. So I'm not saying that he will recuse. I'm saying it's very interesting that he's postponing the decision until September to recuse. He could have simply said, like the last 2 times, I'm not recusing. Maybe this by the Florida congressman is one of the reasons. Florida congresswoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually want to follow up on my colleague from Florida and his line of questioning. As Representative Gates pointed out, the judge's daughter significantly profited from this case to the tune, actually, of $93 million raised for her Democrat clients that include a member of this committee, Representative Goldman, I should point out and put on the record.
So he's one of the most outspoken Democrats, always going after Trump for everything under the sun. Okay, interesting that he's tied to New York politics, let's say.
But also authentic campaigns, of which Lauren Mershon paid nearly $12 million for her work this cycle for her Democrat colleagues, clients, and including $9.7 million by the Biden-Harris campaign. Now, I know that there's been a tremendous amount of discussion today about the severe irregularities of the case, some of the things surrounding jury instructions, but I want to talk about the financial motivations for the DA and the judge. So, Judge Wilson, you just said that he got a waiver from Judicial Ethics Committee, and you were pointing out how just the appearance of any impropriety, it's to be taken very seriously. Can you talk about the Judicial Ethics Committee, who makes up that committee, and what are some of the processes that they would use? Would they consider the $93 million or her clients or a direct immediate relative that is benefiting financially from this case?
If you're asking me who makes up the committee, it's a combination of lawyers and judges who are selected by the Appellate Division of New York to hear issues that judges bring to them, asking whether or not they can act ethically in particular circumstances. I myself availed myself of that committee on several instances. When it comes to whether or not they should consider the amount of the contributions, I actually think the amount of the contributions are irrelevant because, as you recall, I said Judge Merchan shouldn't have made any contribution in any small amount.
Could you imagine if any judge donated directly to Trump's campaign and then had somebody very close to them working to raise millions for Trump's campaign? Could you imagine any of this taking place without MSNBC and CNN and Democrats? The indignation would be heard throughout the galaxy. But it's always the double standard. That's why when Trump gets back in office, he has to treat them in a reciprocal manner. There has to be reciprocity. If there isn't reciprocity, I don't think the future of the country is very bright.
To political campaigns. That's based upon a prohibition of judges being involved in political activities, except if they're in a window period during their own campaign. At that time, then, a judge's campaign may make a contribution to another campaign or to another political organization. But that's a strict requirement that it only be during an election when such a campaign is made. No, it doesn't matter so much what the amount of the money that was being made. It matters that this is someone of first degree of relationship to the judge who is profiting from activities that oppose the defendant before that judge. And even if he had an ethics opinion exonerating him, saying it's okay, your daughter's not a witness and none of her interests are being tried here, so the ethics committee thought it was just fine. There's still an appearance of impropriety that's of great concern.
Okay, so with all this is amazing testimony, and the Florida Congresswoman is doing a fantastic job. The issue is the following. The recusal decision, I think, will be linked not directly, but in part, again, not directly, but in part to the economic environment next month. I think that we've already entered the major catastrophic crash, financial downturn that I've been predicting for 2 years. So watch the stock market crash prediction playlist. By the way, I will have a, I don't have it up yet, but I will have I should have already done that, but I will have the live stream for the stock market crash channel up right after this live stream. So go there right after this live stream, ladies and gentlemen. Go to the stock market crash channel. It's on the front homepage of this channel, H.A. Goodman. You go down below the shorts, below me lifting weights, and it's the stock market crash channel and Bitcoin crash channel. But I'm growing the stock market crash channel. But anyway, go there after this live stream. The financial downturn is going to decide more than anything else November 5th. Now, the stock market crash, financial downturn is directly tied to any recusal decision. If there's a recusal decision because of the immunity issue, the Supreme Court immunity issue, the judge might not want to roll the dice and go to bat anymore for the Democratic Party in New York, because now you're going to have even more New Yorkers angry at Democrats for the financial downturn because Wall Street's in New York. Okay, the financial center of the universe, New York, Tokyo, some other cities, but New York. And so again, when I do like stock market crash channel videos after this, or the stock market crash analysis on this channel, it's infinitely more important than any poll or any political analysis. The stock market for the next 3 months is the future of the country. And I think that it's counterintuitive because we need Trump in office. It's been an unmitigated, unparalleled disaster with Democrats that caused this financial collapse. But only Trump could actually get us out of it. But the more the collapse takes place, the greater the chance of Trump winning, the greater the chance, I think, of also recusal.
To the public in general, and that's what a judge wants to avoid when you're hearing a case. You don't want people to feel that your integrity and that your impartiality is being impacted.
Is compromised, right?
And that's what happened here.
And the judge himself had given contributions, and I think you pointed out very appropriately that it doesn't matter if it was a large or small contribution, but the judge in this case, Judge Merchan, he contributed to a political action committee called Stop Republicans. That is inappropriate, correct? I mean, especially overseeing the case of...
You imagine a judge contributing money to stop Democrats, and then they indict, Hunter or Clinton or whatever. Could you imagine that?
Of the Republican nominee on the ticket, correct?
He should have known better than to make those contributions while a sitting judge.
Right. And I mean, and I see our Democrat witness, Mr. Wu, you're shaking your head. I'm glad that you agree with us that this is a tremendous question mark on the integrity of this trial. But, I also want to talk a little bit about DA Bragg. Now, I pointed out in our previous hearing that DA Bragg raised $850,000 in campaign contributions immediately upon the announcement of the 34 counts. Mr. Fahey, have you seen any other prosecutors run this similar arc of campaigning on getting a particular person and then using it subsequently to raise campaign cash?
Not that I can think of. There might be somebody that's done it before. I think the DA or state's attorney in Atlanta, I think, is doing something similar with that case, using that as a campaign case, her case against Trump. But other than those, I don't know of any. It's certainly possible, but $800,000 for a DA's race is enormous. I know in your circles it's not, but those type of races are usually very low dollar amounts.
So it's safe to say that there's financial motivation in the campaigns by multiple different DAs and politicians to quote unquote get Trump, correct?
At least a political financial motivation, right. Not necessarily personal.
Correct. Thank you. My time has expired. I yield.
So there's a reason, ladies and gentlemen, the judge didn't simply say, nah, it's ridiculous. Why should I recuse? He didn't have to wait until next week. It's not just about immunity. This is actually really huge, okay? I'm telling you, in my humble viewpoint, he would have simply recused today were it not for the financial downturn. And Trump hush money judge Bloomberg says he'll decide on recusal next week. If indeed, because I think the market will completely tank the rest of the week, next week, it'll go up, then down, 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 up, then way down, up, then, cataclysmic drop. You're going to have a different attitude in terms of politics, different analysis, a different calculus. The political calculus from here on out is only tied to the stock market and a possible recession, likely recession. Okay, Democrats can't win no matter, even if you have all of Hollywood, all of media, ignoring inflation, ignoring interest rates, ignoring the border, ignoring miserably failed foreign policy, indoctrinating enough people to make it competitive. They still can't do it without, they still can't do what they did 4 years ago when the market has tanked and there's panic on Wall Street. I think, unfortunately, that's what's going to take place. Okay? Let's listen to this, and then we'll get to some financial analysis.
More on this, let's bring in Will Scharf, Trump attorney and former federal prosecutor. Thank you for being here, Will. By the way, do you remember the judge ever telling that to the jury, that an NDA in and of itself is not illegal?
I don't remember that specifically, but so many of Judge Merchan's decisions have been so wildly out of whack with what we would consider normal courtroom procedure, I wouldn't even hazard a guess as to whether that happened here.
What worries you most about this case? Of course, today we heard these new instructions that the jury can pick.
So if the recusal happens after the verdict is null, void, or then the entire case is given to another judge eventually after the November 5th, when Trump wins. And the thing is, if the recusal takes place, the entire case falls apart, okay? Because then you have a greater investigation by Republicans who almost certainly overtake the House and the Senate. The House and the Senate, because of the financial downturn. So Democrats, Harris, Biden caused this financial downturn, okay? They had energy policies. They had economic policies. They had foreign policies. The Democrats love these policy wonks, these policy nerds. They're so into policies, and all their policies fail. Okay, so what did they do, actually, that was very good? Flood the country full of strategic petroleum reserves, raise interest rates, make it difficult for oil and gas companies to operate while begging for oil and gas, begging for oil from other countries. State they're going to ban fracking. Okay, Harris wants to ban fracking. Okay, not long ago, I used to want to also, because I was indoctrinated, and thank God I left. But I knew in my heart of hearts it wasn't probably a good economic deal, but I thought it was a moral and just thing. Okay, when Democrats pontificate about morality and justice nowadays, oftentimes it's the antithesis of what they're trying to advocate. But let's continue.
From three choices. None of those choices, by the way, were really fully adjudicated within court. Of course, the federal election charge, they're not even authorized to weigh in on that, are they?
Yeah, I think that the judge's position on jury unanimity with respect to what we're calling the predicate offense, the underlying offense that this alleged business records violation, which we believe in and of itself is bunk, that was intended to cover up. The judge's position on jury unanimity, we believe, is unconstitutional, and that's certainly something we would bring up on appeal if this case were ever to reach appeal. But really, I think that the early signs from the jury are quite positive for us. Joe Biden is ready to spike the football at a White House press conference. Meanwhile, the jury's going back to the very first witness in this case, David Pecker, and seems intent on scrutinizing his testimony, really understanding what he did and didn't say. And now they want to really understand what the law is and what the law isn't, and what they were actually instructed to do versus what they might have misremembered from a very long morning this morning.
But, you know, today they got news that a tax charge could be included, and one of those things that maybe the jury doesn't think that there's a federal election charge, or that the overriding charge or the beginning charge is enough to convict on a felony, but just a tax charge that they just heard about today would be enough. There hasn't been any evidence provided in this case about the tax charge, right?
That's exactly right. Litigating this case, it's been like sort of going after a piñata at times, that just pinning down the prosecution on what their actual theory of the case is something we've never had clarity on. And I think that's reflected in the jury instructions. And it just goes to show how outrageous this entire prosecution has been.
Now, you and a lot of other people have said that there are many grounds for an appeal on this case, and I believe that, all kinds of grounds for appeal. This unique suggestion to the jury that they pick one of three and that's enough to convict. A lot of other things, but how soon could that be fast-tracked to a court that might get you the desired result?
Well, there are many grounds for appeal. I'd also note there are many, many grounds for acquittal. There are giant holes in the prosecution's case, which I think Todd Blanche did a masterful job of really revealing during his summation the other day. I don't think the prosecution has come close to proving that President Trump did anything wrong, certainly not that he committed any business records fraud. If there were to be a conviction, we would appeal as quickly as possible. We would attempt to fast track that within the bounds of New York appellate procedure. But in the meantime, we think there are ample grounds for the jury to acquit, and we're...
So he, of course, got convicted. But the point is that None of this was normal. When Democrats and media talk about norms and traditions, they're not referring to their own behavior.
With fears of a recession growing, Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance laid out the simple policy differences between.
So again, in the span of 3 days, now let's move to the political reality that would push for a recusal next week. The market completely tanks with a 10%. 10% will be 4,000 points down, okay? 10% used to be 1,000 points down. When it was 1,000 points down, that was like cataclysmic. Now it would be 4,000 points down. If the Dow tanks 4,000 points in the next 2 weeks, the odds of a recusal go up exponentially in my viewpoint. And Trump, without a shadow of a doubt, cements victory, very likely a landslide victory. The issue, ladies and gentlemen, is that it doesn't take a long time. 4 years of complete and utter mismanagement. Look, I'm telling you right now, I'm conservative on most things, especially the Second Amendment. Most things I'm conservative on, okay? What drives me is I don't want Americans sent to never-ending military conflict. I don't want American soldiers, men and women, sent anywhere in the world. I've written about that in The Hill, the Huffington Post, the Jerusalem Post, other publications. I don't want Americans sent around the world like what we've seen with Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld, and Gulf of Tonkin. I don't want an intel report to send Americans around the world to counterinsurgency conflicts. Only Trump says, nah, I'm not going to listen. Whereas never Trump Republicans and Democrats would say, okay, whatever you say, intel. But that being said, if we had a great economy, if the economy was very good and foreign policy was good and there weren't quagmires around the world, I would either sit out or I would at least admit that Biden and Harris did a good job. But they've done an absolute abysmal failure of. It's been an absolute unmitigated catastrophe. But see, again, Democrats don't care because it's about political power for them. It's not what's good for the country. It's about ideology and political power. Okay, that's why they don't care about inflation, the border, interest rates, quagmires around the world. It's been 4 years. They can't tie any of those problems to their own choices. With Trump, we had a great economy. Then Democrats shut down economic activity. Blue state governors decided to do that. You didn't have to do that. That was a choice. That wasn't your hands weren't tied. Oh, we had to. No, you didn't. That was a choice, and it was a terrible choice. And that's the beginning, the origins of what we're experiencing today.
Trump and Harris speaking with Maria Bartiromo yesterday.
The simple policy difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is we want to open up American energy markets, which will lower the cost of fuel, lower the cost of food, and lower the cost of a whole host of things that people rely on. That will drive down interest rates. And then we want to kick out millions of illegal aliens who shouldn't be in this country, which will lower the price of homes for American citizens. It's actually very simple, Maria. A lot of their economic policies were predicted even by economists on the left to lead exactly where they are now. They went ahead with it because, as Kamala Harris has said, she is a radical who didn't listen to common sense.
Let's bring in Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin to the show. Governor, thanks for being with us on The Bottom Line. I want to get your take on the messaging here. I think if you look at the American voter, they're concerned about the economy. They're concerned about inflation. And I think all of us here would agree that American energy production matters to drive down the costs of oil and gas. You know, the illegal immigration situation is a problem. But doesn't the Trump campaign have to expand its messaging around what else it's going to do to address inflation and the economy?
Well, good afternoon. And I think today's market sell-off is a reflection that recession concerns are real, but they're also totally based on the fact that over the course of the last 3.5 years, we have seen the Harris-Biden administration take every step they could to drive inflation. And that has caused massive, massive problems around the kitchen table. Grocery prices, gas prices, home prices. Virginians and Americans have suffered. And of course,
so then the market went up yesterday, not as much as it went down, but that's how it's going to be, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, go to the stock market crash channel right after this. You have an issue, ladies and gentlemen, with the markets, global markets are worried about recession. Then you have the most overvalued U.S. market in the history of the country. You'll hear that in a second. The bubble's bursting at the absolute worst time for Democrats. Democrats are going to do to their political party what never Trump, Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld Republicans did to the Republican Party in the next 3 months.
Virginians and Americans remember during the Trump administration when mortgage rates were low and gas prices were low and inflation was low and we had high growth. And that is the difference between what they're seeing today and, of course, what they know President Trump will deliver when he's reelected again. The reality, of course, is it's a difference between strength and weakness. And what Kamala Harris represents is yet just the next chapter of the same book. They're going to unleash spending. They don't believe in American energy dominance. They want to cut it and reduce it. And they also have projected that around the world. And let's just be clear. Part of today's sell-off reflects the global uncertainty and chaos that they've unleashed around the world as well. And in fact, they have shown no basic strong support for Israel right now. And the fear is that we're going to have an escalation in the Middle East, not because of what Israel is doing, but because the United States hasn't stood strong and said to Iran, you will not do this, and we will, in fact, play our role to support our ally. This is a culmination of a series of weakness in the economy and in foreign policy, and now we're seeing it come home to roost during the Harris administration.
Yeah, Governor, thank you so much for joining.
So I don't usually weigh on this, but I'll say this. I don't want American soldiers anywhere in any region or any conflict in the world, okay? So that's number one. Number two, all you had to do, if you were Trump, for example, in office, is say, we're going to protect our allies through economic means, first and foremost. You don't have to. That's why I love Trump. None of this would ever have taken place. I want to keep American soldiers home to protect this country, keep them safe from counterinsurgency conflicts and quagmires. You can do that by addressing the issue. So that's what always has driven me. I want Americans, their soldiers, their families safe. I don't want to send American men and women off to never-ending military conflict. Okay. You don't need to do that now. The economy, you go in terms of economic leverage, which is what Trump did with tariffs, which Democrats kept. It's economic leverage. Democrats came in, Biden came in, there's a specific country causing a lot of problems. Okay, I'm not just going to speak in algorithmically friendly terms. The one thing they really care about is economic issues. Okay, maybe you shouldn't unfreeze billions of dollars right when you get into office. Or say, oh yeah, we're going to go with a nuclear deal that you know very well the country is not abiding by. But when you say when you leverage economic might and you don't go begging other countries for oil, that's an issue. Okay, there's a lot of things. None of the problems we saw would have taken place with Trump, because number one, Trump stands by allies in large part through economic leverage, and he implements foreign policy through economic might and leverage. Again, now we have the economy is tanking. It's directly the fault of Democrats.
Joining us, by the way. I think it's the first time you've been here. And, you know, what's fabulous in this time of uncertainty and war and chaos and inflation is what your victory meant when you were first elected governor. I mean, the ability to move in, it was really gave people a sense that something new could happen. You came from business, which we're seeing the results of people who don't understand business or are even hostile to it. And, a lot of people might not know that you can't run for consecutive terms. So you had one term to be able to get something done besides being known for the education issue. We can look at your state of Virginia, which just welcomed its 10,000th new business since you took office, a remarkable accomplishment. Can you let people know that in the midst of this chaos and the federal government that doesn't seem to know what it's doing, what did you do in Virginia to make that happen?
Well, we brought common sense to bear in a state that had allowed common sense to be pushed out of the room. Virginia was bottom third in job growth. Small businesses were closing left, right, and center. And we came in and said, we're open for business. We're going to reduce tax burdens. We had $5 billion of tax relief. We streamlined regulations. And we said to everybody, we are going to be pro-business. And of course, what that has resulted in is record job growth. We have 260,000 more Virginians working today than just 2.5 years ago. Record investment, over $75 billion of capital committed by companies that are here or ones that are coming. And yes, we set our target to have 10,000 new high growth startups in Virginia by the time our administration was done. And we're 2.5 years in, we've already blown through that target. I think what it really demonstrates is that common sense conservative policies work. And we were just named top state for business in America because of those common sense conservative policies. This is what Virginians and Americans are looking for. They're looking for strength and leadership. And again, I have to go back to the fact that what they have seen in the Biden-Harris administration is continued misstep after misstep after misstep, driving inflation and undermining economic growth. And everyone understands that when you unleash unfettered spending, and Kamala Harris was the deciding vote to unleash trillions of dollars of spending that drove inflation up across America. When you do this, it is the silent thief that steals hardworking Virginians and Americans' paychecks. And that's why it makes it so hard for anyone to really contemplate handing the economy over to her again, when in fact they have seen the Trump administration do what they can do.
I thought we had the Inflation Reduction Act. Remember that? Didn't reduce inflation. Now we have a huge problem. Huge problem. This is about a week and a half ago, but listen to this really brilliant analysis right here about how overvalued the market is, global markets as well.
All right, this is the market in the last 48 hours, of course. Taking a look at the Dow, big comeback today after a big beating yesterday, the same for the NASDAQ. So what do you buy, the free fall yesterday or so far the comeback today? Peter Eliades, the Stock Market Cycle editor and publisher, but certainly not buying a bull market, at least for the longer term. Peter, what do you think?
Oh, Neil, I'm so happy I could talk with you to attempt to revitalize what must have been a painfully quiet and boring past few weeks of news for you.
You're right, my friend. But you've been looking this apart from all these, fundamental developments, because you read the technicals. And what do the technicals tell you?
Well, right now, the technicals are getting more and more bearish. One of the things that, when you know that I'm very much maybe 99 and 44 100% ivory technician and not fundamentalist. But the one fundamental thing I like to look at, Neil, at extremes is valuation. Valuation is completely useless, usually. It can give you an idea when you get to real extremes on the low side or on the high side. My favorite valuation metric is by John Hussman of Hussman Econometrics. And on July 22nd, Neil, Hussman said that on Tuesday, July 16th, his valuation metrics reached the greatest extreme overvalued in history of 100 years.
The greatest extreme overvalued metric. And now we're seeing the bubble slowly pop. But let's listen to this again. Okay, again, this directly correlates to recusal. November 5th, Trump winning and Democrats, their political party, the modern era of the Democratic Party, doing the same thing as the old school Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld Republicans. So I think the Democrats, they've had endless quagmires, military quagmires, just like Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld, and maybe not exactly the same, but then they ended their tenure of inept and failed policies with a financial collapse, just like 2008. But let's listen to this again.
Hussman said that on Tuesday, July 16th, his valuation metrics reached the greatest extreme overvalued in history of 100 years, going back to before 1929. So that was impressive. And he mentioned July 16th, and of course, we've started to come down from there. Now, does that guarantee a top? Of course not. But the point is, Neil, where is the next 15, 20, 30, 40, 50% going to be? My evaluation of the upside potential from current levels is we have a 0 to 5% chance of going up 10 to 20% from here. And we have a 50 to 70% chance of going down more than 50%.
So these numbers that you're seeing right now, they're from a week and a half ago when the markets were up before they completely tanked. But listen to the chances, the likelihood, according to this really awesome, very intelligent market expert, over 50% chance it tanks completely.
40, 50% going to be. My evaluation of the upside potential from current levels is we have a 0 to 5% chance of going up 10 to 20% from here. And we have a 50 to 70% chance of going down more than 50%.
Let's say there's a 50 to 70% chance of going down more than 50%, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, then what happens is, of course, Democrats say, oh, there wasn't enough regulation, ignoring all the failed energy policies, foreign policy, all the fact they ignored inflation. So they're going to try to blame Trump at the end of their 4-year tenure of mismanagement. It ain't going to work. It'll cement Trump's victory. But let's continue here.
All right. Jeff Seeker joins me now. You think that we're going further south on this market, don't you?
I do, Stuart. Last night at around 12:05, if you follow astrology, Mercury is in retrograde, which the astrologists say it's a time of chaos. I don't believe that. I just think it's interesting. Yeah, but no, that's not the real reason.
Well, you got us all smiling anyway. Go ahead.
That's not the real reason. The real reason, Stuart, is I know everybody's talking about the typical valuations, interest rates, as Brian said, concerns about the Fed. But what I see is a much deeper problem. And that deeper problem came out of Japan in trading yesterday, where they halted both the stock and bond market. What I see is there's a problem in the credit market, because what Brian was saying about the Fed cutting interest rates, have they raised interest rates too much? What we're seeing in the worldwide credit market is we are seeing counterparty risk. And what that means is we could start to see an avalanche of credit defaults, of problems with the banks. Now, what does that mean for the U.S. market? What it means is that, yes, you're going to get these quick fix rallies. You're going to get these anticipations of interest rates being cut. But what we have in the banking system is a massive amount of debt. We have $1.5 trillion that needs to be refinanced in commercial loans, which is what I do. I'm in the real estate industry. There's a lot of vulnerability out there, and what I've been saying on the show all along is that the market obviously was too focused on a few stocks. I said on the show last week that earnings would be lackluster, but what I believe is going to happen is we're going to see a credit crisis that we haven't seen in a very long time, and it's problematic.
Okay, outside of the credit problem, which you're right to raise on this show,
you're going to have a credit crisis when smaller banks unfortunately go under. Now, again, market could go up Wednesday, Thursday, and then tank Friday. It could go up Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then take Monday, and then next Tuesday. You could go up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, next Monday. Oh my God, it's back. Happy days are here again. And then Tuesday, it crashes like 87 and 1929. So, or in 08. I believe all 2 of the 3 were Tuesdays, or 3 of the 3. Anyway, the point is, you can't predict. I've been saying it's going to happen for 2 years. Incidentally, Roger Babson, the historic, renowned historian that predicted 1929, was doing it for 2 years too, predicting it for 2 years. The point is, you cannot exactly predict the date, but you can see the landscape, and it's terrible. Again, that is going to be the determining factor of Trump defeating Harris and the possible recusal next week.
what about the recession? Are we headed to recession?
I believe we are. And Stuart, it's been the consumer. The consumer drives 70% of the market, and the consumer has been pushed to the brink, and we're starting to see that. Now, there's been this false belief that the strength of the employment market, that it had to do with the amount of employees that are being hired. What is in reality is that 1.2 million Americans, U.S. citizens, lost their jobs, which were replaced by 1.3 million foreign-born or illegal immigrants. That is U.S. labor statistics. That shows that the labor market was never as strong as it was, and a lot of the new jobs being created by part-time workers, it's never been as strong as it was. Now you're going to see layoffs, and there's going to be more carnage in the future, leading us to a deeper recession.
Okay, when it comes to the market, how do investors protect themselves? What should an investor do today?
Well, they shouldn't look at astrological charts.
No.
What they should do, they shouldn't also panic. What they should do is look at where they're over allocated. Too many of us have too much money in those big seven. Reduce those. Just cut them. But don't sell them.
What do you
don't
mean?
sell them entirely, but reduce.
How do you reduce
positions.
your stake if you don't sell?
Well, you sell, but don't sell out completely. So you reduce the amount of shares you have and raise cash, because cash is king. The good thing about sell-offs, I like buying real estate. I think real estate's a good investment. I like gold. The good thing about sell-offs is it creates opportunities that we haven't had in a very long time. So cash is king. Raise cash and wait, but you don't have to sell everything. You're going to have these relief rallies, but people who are coming in and saying there's going to be bargain hunting coming out now, I think it's far too soon for that.
Okay, all right.
All right, folks. Well, my next guest wonders why so many on Wall Street are surprised by the latest warning signals and ask, why don't they just listen to conference calls?
So again, the next 3 months, politics and the stock market will merge. It's the same thing. If you see the market up, you see it down. The market going up increases Biden and Harris's chances. The market going down increases Trump's chances. unfortunately for the country and for everyone's pocketbook, especially if you have a 401k, the market going down will obviously hurt because it loses money. The only silver lining is that it cements Trump's victory. But see, again, this is the result. What happens the next 3 months is directly tied to the mismanagement of the past 4 years. So I don't think you're going to get away from the economic consequences of mismanagement by Biden and Harris for the next 4 years.
I'd also add, why don't they just listen to this show as well? But let's bring in Wellington Altus Private Wealth Chief Market Strategist Jim Thorne. Hey Jim, glad to have you with us. So we've got your note, right, and your July. This is your July note going back to July 2nd. So you were saying July insights, navigating the dual revolution. One of the things that you talked about is the coming fiscal storm. So you talked about this a month ago, and it seems to be like breaking news on Wall Street right now. What's going on?
We're allowed to talk about things, quite frankly, at Wellington. I think it's our clients like that, and we try to take a non-consensus view. So, Charles, nobody should be surprised about what's going on. The Fed is significantly behind the curve. They should be cutting at least 150 basis points right now. We know monetary policy works with a lag. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the market is coming to terms with the fact that with fiscal deficits at 7% and debt to GDP at 125%, what do the politicians, let's try to keep it agnostic, but if politicians really don't understand the severity of the situation, then it really comes down to a question of, do we get a credit crisis before we get a growth scare? And we would suggest that it's really going to be very interesting to see how the new president and the cabinet deals with it. Right. And right now, Charles, we're really not hearing anything comforting on the political stage that suggests that either, and I'm trying to be objective, either candidate, Mr. Trump or Ms. Harris, is willing to basically attack head on the fiscal problem that's in the room.
So he has very good, brilliant analysis. He probably knows very well that Harris is, light years away from even trying to address the issue since she and Biden created the issue.
And that is the most concerning thing that I suggest.
Yeah, it's 150 basis points. Now, Jeremy Siegel was out with 75 basis points, and a lot of folks on the street kind of brushed them off. I want to make sure we've got that out there. 150 basis point cut you would like to see right now.
I think, well, the 2-year is 150 basis points below where the Fed funds rate is. We need to get the yield curve steep again. And then once we get it steep, we need it to sit there to allow the effects of the positive monetary shock to work through the system. They should have been cutting already. So Mr. Siegel says 75 today and then 75 in September. Sure, we've got to get the rates normalized. And it's unfortunate that the economists at the Fed and on Wall Street are ignoring the elephant in the room. And look, you talked about and I'll say this to you, Charles, we have known each other for decades. This reminds me of 1997 when Hong Kong blew up. They attacked the peg. And then 16 months later, we had the long-term capital management crisis in Wall Street that almost took out the 6th or 5 largest prime brokers. This is the beginning. The risk that your viewers should take is this. If nothing changes in respect to how governments view the deficit situation and how Powell and the Fed that are completely and totally disconnect, if they don't change, then you've got to put financial crisis on your bingo card. And that is something that we need to be honest about.
Right.
And I really wish that the conversation would be more frank and honest about the massive mistakes that the Federal Reserve is making right now.
I've got less than a minute to go. If we're being honest and frank, I don't think anyone on Wall Street who have the power to pull the levers are going to take your advice. So then what happens next?
Well, I think we really have to evaluate what the cabinet does, the new cabinet does in the spring of 2025. Look, it's way too early for a growth scare. We've got too much fiscal stimulus in the economy. That's a back half 25 story. I still like AI. I still like technology. Look, Charles, for your viewers, put the 40-week exponential moving average up on your screen. They've taken everything back to it. Sure, the S&P 5,000.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a really, really interesting curveball or sinker or slider off-speed pitch that is going to kind of put the political scene off balance, okay? The judge recuses next week. I'm not sure if he will, but the chances go up if there's an even greater crash, which I believe in the next 3 months we'll see. I think that the past 3-4 days, you saw markets realize, oh my God, it's overvalued and there's a recession on the horizon. It doesn't go down every single day. It goes down, then up, maybe way back up, then way down, and then it keeps going down. And then you have catalysts like bank collapses, hedge fund collapses, all of these types of things that can take place. And there's no way to know the next crypto Ponzi scheme that goes under. So I do believe that Trump's going to win. I think that his win's going to be cemented, unfortunately, by a terrible, terrible market crash we're going to see in the next 3 months. And I think that's going to weigh in heavily on any recusal decision. Because I don't think the judge, I don't think any judge wants to be scrutinized for a decision that's going to be overturned by the Supreme Court anyway. It's unconstitutional. A state cannot level a federal charge at anyone without the federal government involved. The FEC dropped the case. The DOJ didn't even bring the case. And it was the state of New York that decided he committed a federal crime, not the federal government. That's unconstitutional. Anyway, hit subscribe. Go to the Stock Market Crash channel right now, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have a live stream up right there. Thank you, everybody.